Hello again, this is Jerry Roberts, and in this particular video we're going to be looking at the religion of Scientology. Now, Scientology is a little bit unique in the fact that it is a completely modern religious movement. Most of the other groups that we've looked at have a long history. Many of them began in the 1800s, maybe even have background back into the 1700s. This Scientology came into existence basically during my lifetime. It's only been around for maybe 50 years, and so it's a very, very new religion and very weird. You probably have heard about it here and there, but most people don't really understand exactly what Scientology really is or how it operates. It hides its actual real, I guess you'd say its real existence, its real core behind a lot of different signs and a lot of different organizations. You could hear about the organization Narconon or Criminon. They also have several. They have a Applied Learning International, that is a thing that helps children to learn better and such. They have teachings about Dianetics and all this kind of stuff, and so there's lots of different ways that people get exposed to some of the teachings of Scientology and get drawn into Scientology, and we'll talk about some of those as we move through here. But what most people don't realize is how interesting and how different Scientology is from almost any other religion. Now, it has little pieces and parts of some of the Eastern religions, but it's very different from any other religion that most people are ever exposed to. The founder is L. Ron Hubbard. L. Ron Hubbard was born in 1911, died in 1986. He was a science fiction writer for most of his life. He founded Scientology later in his life in the 1960s. He is known, there's actually a quote from him, and I'm not putting the quote up here because it's one of those that it's on the internet, and I know it exists, but I'm not sure if it's real or not. But he's said to have been quoted as of having said, if you really want to make a lot of money, start your own religion. And so if that quote is true, then he did fulfill his own wise saying in the 1960s and began a religion called Scientology. And his primary book on which most of Scientology is based is called Dianetics, the Modern Science of the Mind. And what is it that draws people to Scientology? Once again, I already mentioned the fact that people are drawn in by these auxiliary organizations. There are people who are going to, like, Narconon, which is for narcotics, or Criminon, who are people who've come out of jail and looking for support, or Applied Learning International, who their kids are not being able to learn very well, and they go to these places to get help with family issues, or maybe they have problems with depression or addictions or whatever else, and they get introduced to the concept of Dianetics. Now, Dianetics is really just an introduction into this whole world of Scientology, and there are people, a person could read the book Dianetics and even practice some of the Dianetics practices about, improving the way that you think about yourself, improving the way that you think about life, improving the way you think about learning. Some of those elements are just good practical learning, and there are people who could be practicing some of the things of Dianetics without actually joining the cult or the Church of Scientology. However, most of the time there is this push for you to get deeper and deeper into it. So what are some of the basics of Scientology? Some of the Scientology basics are really, really very pretty. They're very pretty sounding. First of all, that humans are eternal spiritual beings whose experiences are much more than one life. There's this idea that similar to what you might find in Hinduism and in Buddhism, the idea that people are not just the real essence of who you are is not just this particular life and this particular body. The real essence of who you are is something more eternal, more spiritual, more that's continued to live through many, many lives. Scientology teaches that human abilities are unlimited. Basically, there's nothing that we can't do. Now, these abilities may be currently unrealized, but that doesn't mean that we can't do anything. It teaches that people are made up of three parts. And the one part that you'll see me mentioning or hear me mentioning many times in this video is the thetan. thetan. Okay, that's a new phrase if you've never studied Scientology before. The thetan is the person's real being. It might be called our soul, it might be called our spirit, whatever you want to call it. The thetan is who you really are, the essence of who you really are. And it's that thetan is the part of you, the element of you that has lived through many, many cycles of lives. And the thetan is who you really are. There's also the mind that the thetan used to interact with its surroundings, and the body, which is nothing more than a temporary container. Now, thetans, who we are actually in our essence, in our natural state, they're eternal and almost godlike in their powers. So understand this concept of a thetan. We're not talking about just you in this particular life cycle. We're talking about the thetan as being who you are in essence, and who you, the being that you truly are is eternal and almost godlike in its abilities. Thetans can understand, can know, can do anything in the universe. But for now, the thetan, you're the thetan, who you really are, the essence of who you are, is imprisoned in mest. And you'll see that term mest thrown around a lot in the Dianetics, and especially when you get into Scientology teachings. Mest is just a short little phrase for matter, energy, space, and time. So this eternal, powerful being that is the thetan, who you really are at your essence, is right now imprisoned in this body, in this space and time, and has forgotten what it is, and has forgotten what it can do. So your essence, who you are as the thetan that is you, has forgotten what it is and has forgotten what it can do. So understand, the whole concept of Scientology is going in and waking up and bringing to life that which you truly are in your essence. All right, so this is kind of what's going on here. It's for your thetan has forgotten what it is and what it can do, but thetans are truly immortal, and they move to a new body after each death. Now, there's a long story and explanation about this, of how when the thetan passes away, it actually goes into a holding chamber, and then the holding chamber, it moves back into a new body because it doesn't know what else to do, because it's still forgotten who it is and forgotten what it can do. So thetans are trapped in this cycle and experience many traumatic events in their lives. Okay, so now we've got this thetan. It's all powerful. It can do anything. Thetans are who we are in our essence, but right now it's trapped in this life cycle. Once again, there's some hints of Hinduism in here as well. And the thing about it is, though, that thetans, as they've lived through all these life cycles, they have experienced all kind of traumatic events. Now, this issue of traumatic events of their past lives is where a lot of the Scientology practices comes into play. To be fully realized people, or to be fully realized thetans, as they would say, we must overcome these things that have harmed us in our past lives, and these things that are affecting our current lives and keeping us from becoming all that we are intended to be. Now, these traumatic experiences are called engrams. Okay, they're called engrams that are recorded on that thetan's time track. Now, once again, I'm throwing all these terms at you. Don't worry about them. They're not real. They're science fiction is what they really are. Literally, I mean, I could see how somebody who really loves Star Trek like I do could kind of be attracted to this. Ooh, cool, time track. Wow, engrams, awesome. You know, all these cool terminologies you get to throw around. But the full track for a particular thetan might be millions of years long, because you haven't just lived in the past hundreds of years. You've lived thousands, maybe millions of years as a thetan. But here's the problem. These engrams, these traumatic experiences of your past, are still on this time track. And these engrams are the cause for physical illnesses many times, for mental illnesses, for irrational thoughts, and especially they're the cause for the limitations on the powers and abilities that you have right now in your essence, in your being. As a thetan, you are not all that you are supposed to be. And so you can see here, Scientology invites people to move through a set of stages that are called the bridge to total freedom. And over on the side of your screen there, you can see this little image of this bridge to total freedom. I was able to capture these from the internet. You can see that you start out at this very low level and you move through these stages, and as you move through these stages, you're working to become all you were intended to be. At the very beginning of the process, a person is called a pre-clear. And you'll hear, once again, if you're around Scientology, if you choose to go to a church of Scientology for your visit to a cult group, you might hear a person called a pre-clear. A pre-clear is a person who's just now starting the process, and they are in the beginning of being freed from their problems, being freed from their engrams of the past. They eventually reach a state called clear. Now, clear means that a person has reached the point that they're freed and clean from all of their past hindrances and can start to live as a fully liberated being. So the goal of the entry levels of Scientology is to reach a state called clear. All right? Now, once again, though, that's not all of it. You reach clear, and then after you reach clear, you can see this chart keeps going up and up. After you reach clear, there's this thing called OT. Well, the goal of the whole process is to become an operating thetan. Yes, that's a cool sounding phrase, but when you're making up phrases, you might as well make up cool ones. The whole process is you want to become an operating thetan. Now, an operating thetan is one who has the ability to exist and operate without the help of their physical body. An operating thetan becomes free from the cycle of rebirths because it remembers who it is and remembers what it can do. And when this particular body dies, if you reach the point of being an operating thetan, okay, if you reach the level of becoming an operating thetan, especially, which again, you have to move, you can see operating thetan 1, 2, 3. There's actually currently 9 levels of operating thetan. Actually, I found one chart that had 15 levels of operating thetan. So they keep on adding up more opportunities as you go forward. But if on the death of this particular body, if you have reached the point of operating thetan and you remember who you are and what you can do, you will have the ability, when you leave this body, you don't have to go back to that way station. You don't have to go back to that station anymore and be waited to be put back into another body. You can choose, now you're free as an operating thetan, to travel the universe. You'll have the power to control time, energy, thought, and life. You can live anytime you want. You can become a creature for a while and you can move out of that creature. You can move to different planets. If you become an operating thetan, you become almost godlike in your abilities. So, how do you move into these levels? Well, people move through these steps with the help of an auditor. An auditor is a person who sits on the other side of a table from you. And they're kind of like, a little bit like what we would consider a counselor, but understand, I didn't even include this in my particular presentation because it goes down another avenue. Scientology, Dianetics, the entire focus is they do not believe in psychotherapy, they do not believe in psychiatry, they don't believe in any sort of counseling therapy at all. They believe all of that is a sham. And so what they do instead is the auditors help people to find their own way to freedom. They discuss mental images and throw mental images out there, and they say questions to you, and they guide the person in new ways of mental focusing to clear their engrams. Now, they work with this little thing you can see a little picture of, and you can find a lot of different pictures of this on the internet as well, called an e-meter. It's actually an electropsychometer, which is also a cool thing if you're making words up. Now, this is a device that claims to measure a person's galvanic skin response to engrams, meaning if you're sitting there and you're talking about something that happened in your past, or you talk about the image of a tree and you start talking about a tree, supposedly this little meter goes back and forth to show that there was an engram. Once again, an engram is this traumatic experience that happened to you in your past. And the auditors are going along methodically, and they allow a person to look deeply in themselves, and they look deeply in themselves now first, and then they start moving into their past lives to discover all the traumatic occurrences. All right. Now, once this e-meter shows that there was an engram there, the person is instructed to use their newly discovered powers as a thetan to erase this from their mental track, from that time track that they had. And as they erase these engrams, it removes their blockages to growth. Now, if you understand everything I just said, either number one, you've already been in Scientology, and number two, you're crazy. So just mention that. You're not supposed to understand this. Just be aware of it. But this is the idea. You sit there, you hold these two little thingies in your hands, and they say stuff to you, and they watch the meter, and when the engram's there, you close your eyes, and you say, oh, I'm going to remove that engram. I'll remove that traumatic experience from my time track. And so this is a process that people go through to get clear, and once they get clear, to move on higher in the operating thetan levels. Now, the initial sessions are usually free or very inexpensive, maybe $35. And once again, you can see this kind of place. You might be at a conference or something. They say free stress test, and they put you on this meter and they start asking you questions. Like, oh wow, I can see you have problems here. I see you have problems there, but it's all a way just to get you started. You go through many of these different sessions, and once again, you go back to that chart again. I'll just run back there real quick and see. You go through this chart, you can see every one of these sessions that you go through might have 25, 35, 40 hours of auditing. So each one of the levels going up to clear can cost a person between $2,000 and $5,000. These auditing sessions start out at $200 an hour, but can move up to $800 per hour for you to sit there and hold these metal things in your hands while a boring person says stuff to you and tells you when the meter moves back and forth. Anyway, but that's what you do. You go up there. Here's the deal. Current estimates, and these are, you got websites there that you can type in and see yourself. Current estimates to reach operating thetan level 9 costs an estimated $375,000 per person. You don't get to do this as a team. $375,000 per person if you go through all of the steps that were on that chart to reach operating thetan level 9. Now, there's other literature, there's their attendance at conferences that might even add more to that. But to do all of this auditing, to go through all these steps, to get yourself clear, to do all these things, are approximately $375,000. And here's the deal. And once again, I must admit, I'm using Wikipedia as one of my sources here. You don't get to do that. I can do it just because, hey, I'm the teacher. No, actually, it's hard to find this information many places. There's a place called Xenu.net, and there's also Wikipedia. There's other sources out there. But Scientology suppresses this so much that you can almost only find it at these secondary sites and such. Because it's only at the upper operating thetan levels that a Scientologist gets to find out the real truths of Scientology about the beginning of the world. And here they are. 75 million years ago, there was a galactic overlord called Xenu. And yes, I'm reading it to you. Who ruled over 76 planets, which were terribly overpopulated. And in the effort to reduce this overpopulation problem, Xenu, the galactic overlord, rounded up hundreds of millions of the residents from these planets and put them on huge spaceships, which delivered them to an empty planet that later became our planet Earth. Xenu then killed all of these beings by planting atomic bombs in volcanoes and having them explode. After they died, the spirits of these beings still inhabited the planet, but they could not remember who they were. So Xenu forced them to watch films. Now, once again, it wasn't films like we see them, but like projections in their minds. But films of life on this planet, and convinced them that this was, in fact, their homeland. So these spirits just hung out on our planet. After the beings on Earth became humans through evolutionary processes, these spirits, known as body thetans, began to live out their lives in us. Okay, so here's the deal. You are, in essence, a thetan, but you also have a body thetan, or one or more body thetans that are attached to your thetan that's living out its life in you. The only way I can just, it's almost like a demon. It's like you've got these little demons hanging on to your actual essence. So anyway, here's the deal. At the highest operating thetan levels of Scientology, the participant, once they've gone through all these things, they've cleared all their engrams off of their time track and all this kind of stuff, the last thing they have to do is to communicate with their body thetans through telepathy. Yes, through telepathy. You have to convince these body thetans that they are not from this planet and force them to leave. And at that point, you have obtained full freedom and have obtained that salvation, becoming the operating thetan you need to be in order to escape the cycle of lives and go and become the godlike being you're intended to be. Okay, I'm just going to leave it at that and move on. Scientology is a very large, very wealthy, very powerful organization, over 8 million, up to estimates up to 14 million followers. It brings in an average of $500 million a year in profits. And they use this power to influence governments, to lure new members, and to suppress the testimonies of disenfranchised former members. There are very harsh means and ways that if a person leaves Scientology and goes around starts talking about the truth of Scientology, they are treated very harshly. They are mistreated. They are hunted down. They are all kind of horrible things happen to people who leave Scientology and begin to talk negatively about it. And they have the wealth and the power to be able to do this. Scientology is the religion of choice for quite a few well-known stars. You recognize some of these people here. And their teachings really appeal to wealthy, talented people. The idea that humans are more than we seem, that we're almost godlike in our potential and our abilities. And so these stars, because these are big names and people see them, they attract members to want to take part in Scientology practices. However, the average person couldn't possibly afford the extreme costs of moving through the levels to full liberation. And once again, we already talked about nearly $400,000. So, a lot of people don't make $400,000 in their lifetime, let alone be able to afford it to go through a religious practice. So to earn their salvation, they serve Scientology full time in one of their many auxiliary organizations. One of the biggest ones is called Sea Org. There's also Narconon, Criminon, Applied Scholastics, okay? So these people dedicate their lives to Scientology, and they work 60, 70, 80 hours a week for Scientology for free. Scientology gives them a place to live and feeds them, but the rest of all what they would be, their salary, goes into them being able to sit there with the e-meter and move through the processes. So you can earn your way through these processes either by giving a lot of money or by totally giving your whole life to Scientology. So how do we reach a member of Scientology? Well, first of all, remember, there are many different levels of Scientology. There might be a person who's just dabbling in Dianetics. Another person might be getting ready to move to operating thetan levels. So don't assume that when you're talking to a person, they say, oh, well, I'm a Scientologist. Well, find out what that means. Are they just getting started, or are they so deep into it that you're dealing with a person who's got some, you're going to have to really deal with a lot. So find out where they are before you start assuming things. Focus on the truths of the gospel and how it answers the needs they feel that Scientology is meeting for them. The need for healing from past experiences. Christ is our healer. He heals our hearts. He heals our memories. He restores that which the life and the enemy has stolen from us. Focus on the need for forgiveness for their participation in past wrongdoing. One of the things they talk about is how they have to go back and forgive themselves for practices that they've taken part in that they know are wrong now. And the understanding that humans are more than what they seem. We believe that we have become the children of God through adoption, through faith in Christ. That's more than what humans appear to be, the very children of God. So focus on these things that would really speak to their heart and really show them that Christ meets the needs that they think Scientology is meeting for them. And then, once again, understand the need to explain the differences and lead them to Christ. You're going to have to dig in, you're going to have to dig through, you're going to have to explain and reinterpret and help them to understand that some of the ideas that they have are not going to line up with biblical Christianity. But you're going to have to take the time to explain that, and once again, more than anything, lead them to Christ. You're not leading them through a different form, a different method, a different set of steps. You're leading them to faith in Christ, who is their salvation. So, hope that you got some good things out of this, and that you're able to be more aware of Scientology, what it means, and hopefully be able to help someone who is, first of all, help people to stay away from it, and second of all, help people who are in it to find ways, freedom from the path to freedom. God bless y'all.